Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to share this guest with you. And first of all, welcome to Vegetarians and Meat Lovers Split Table Recipes. I'm really excited to talk to this person. I love to talk to other people who like to cook. And I want to welcome Do you go by Brianna or do you go by Garden Box Baking? Because I know that's what you are on Instagram.
Yeah,
Oh, you
well,
do
I
have,
mean,
yeah,
garden box baking's like my handle for everything, but I'm Brianna.
Brianna Shaver. And you are a digital creator, a pastry chef turned stay at home mom. You do food photography, recipe development, and custom orders out of Seattle.
hmm
That's
Yes.
awesome. So what does a pastry chef do? Like I know there's different titles of different chefs, but what exactly is a pastry chef?
Well, I guess it depends where you work, but I mean, you're just in charge of any kind of dessert. For if you're working in a restaurant, of course, all the desserts on the restaurant on their menu. I was doing corporate dining mostly,
Hmm.
so that was a little bit different because we were in charge of all of the desserts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner throughout the day. And then just, having a team of pastry cooks and coming up with different recipes, different cuisines, that sort of thing.
Well, that's fun. So when you were doing
Yeah.
that, were you the only pastry chef or were there others that you were working with?
No, there were a lot. I was actually working at the Meta building, one of the Meta buildings here in Seattle. And so every building had their own pastry chef. And when I left, I think there were like 8 buildings, maybe
Oh,
more around the general area. There's a lot around here, so there were a lot of us. But on my team, there was I think four or five of us pastry chefs,
oh,
and then we all had a smaller team of pastry cooks as well.
that sounds really fun. Did you enjoy
Yeah,
doing it?
I did. Yeah, it was really fun. I ended up leaving after I had my daughter. I went back to work for a few months, and then I was like, this is not sustainable. So yeah.
I totally understand because I kind of
Mhm.
did something similar. And then I went part-time. My first was born, then I went part-time. And then after I had my second, I just became a stay-at-home mom too. So I was a stay-at-home mom for about 6 years. And then I went back to working. And so it's hard to leave your child. And some people that's just not okay to them. And that's how I was too. I wanted to spend that time with my kids when they were young. Was that your
Mhm.
thought too? Or what was your going through your head?
Yeah, I mean, I just was not okay with child like daycare. I
Mm,
just could not fathom dropping her off at daycare. So we got a nanny, and it was really
mm,
great. But then I'm like, I'm spending almost my entire paycheck to pay someone else to raise my daughter when
exactly.
that time is so precious. They change so much that it's like, I don't want to miss all these milestones. So it just did not make
Yes.
sense. Yeah.
So true. And that's exactly how I felt too. And you don't get that time back.
Mhm.
Mine are all teenagers now, but so it's still very, very busy, but it's different because they can do things on their own. But you don't get those young years back. So I
Yeah.
totally get where you're coming from there. So you've taken your experience and you've turned it into doing what you're doing now. So tell us about what you're doing
Mhm.
right now.
Yeah, so now I mostly do content creation for mostly Instagram, but I've also started branching out into YouTube Shorts and TikTok, and I have some other things in the works. But yeah, just posting on there. And then I do recipe development and food photography for companies. So they'll usually send me some kind of ingredient that they're looking to promote, and then I can develop a recipe based around the ingredient, do some photos for them, and yeah. And then I also do custom orders here in Seattle for cakes and that kind of thing. But I'm kind of trying to move away from that and just do the content because I like it more. It's much more flexible.
Yeah. It's I can imagine to be kind of hard with a child to be like, "Okay, I gotta make a cake right now for this timeline." And it's a little bit
Yeah,
harder when you're doing your own content creation, you're on your own timeline. So that's a big difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So when you're doing it, I actually found you it's kind of interesting how I found you because you have worked with Celafina spices, right?
Yeah.
And I have too. And so I got an email from them and you were featured. And I'm like, oh, hey, I'm going to hit her up and see if she wants to come on the podcast. So
Yeah.
that's actually how I hooked up with you. And then I messaged you on Instagram. So that was kind of fun that we both done that. Now, have you done a lot
Yeah.
with them? I've only done a little bit with them.
I started working with them in January, so
Mhm.
just I did like I think I've done 6 recipes or so. Yeah, I think I've done about 6 so far, and then I'm actually working on a spice blend with them right now, which would be like a
Mm.
custom spice blend, which is very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very exciting. So now when you're doing your content creation now, are you kind of sticking with the pastry stuff or are you venturing into different areas?
I pretty much just do paste, like just desserts for the most part. I mean, I posted a couple of things that are not sweet, but for the most part, just desserts. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't eat desserts 24/7. I eat lots of different things, but
We'd all
yeah,
love to do that, right? That's not
I
going to
know.
work.
If only.
If only. Exactly. So what are you working on right now? Other than you said you're working like a spice blend, is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm working on a spice blend with them. I am working with a brand called Cookie Chips right now as well.
Mm.
They do like packaged cookies, like cookie mixes.
Mhm.
And so I've been developing different recipes using their cookie mixes, which has been fun. And then I'm also just really busy, like in my personal life right now, with some like
Mhm.
home things. And so it's been hard to get a ton of content done lately, but
Mhm.
yeah, just juggling everything.
It's fun though that you can do it kind of on your own pace and that you can still do some things and not being completely out of
Mhm,
touch with what you did when you were working. So you can
mhm.
kind of like keep in that a little bit, and it can grow
Yeah.
into something too for you. Like that's
Mhm,
what's really cool about it being that, doing an online stuff is that you can do as little or as a lot as you want and you can just grow from it, which is really
mhm.
fantastic.
Yes, yes, for sure. The goal is to eventually replace my previous salary with this stuff, so I'm working towards it.
Absolutely. Now, do you maintain a website yet or are you just pretty much using social media?
No, I have my domain. I like have my website kind of halfway built. I just
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
just need the time. I need to find the time to sit down and really finish it. But eventually the goal is to get it going and to start doing more like long form recipes on there.
Yeah, definitely. So, what's your favorite pastry to make?
Gosh, I know people ask me this all the time, and I have such a hard time answering because I don't know. I don't know. I love making everything. I mean, really, I love to make what I love to eat. So carrot
Mm,
cake and
mhm.
scones and that sort of thing. But I don't know that I have a favorite one to make. I love all of it.
Do you have any secrets to share of things that you've learned over the years?
One great secret is if you need a recipe quick and you don't know, you don't have one on hand and you don't know where to look because there's so many out there. King Arthur flour has the best recipes. Their test recipes are so good. I always, if
Oh,
I'm like needing some inspiration, I always go over there and look at some of their stuff because yeah, everything I've tried, every recipe I've made from them is always 10 out of 10.
oh, nice. And so, how do you spell that? Did you say King Arthur or what did you say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, King
King
Arthur.
Arthur.
So it's the flour brand, but then they have like all these recipes on their
Mm,
website. Yeah, they're great.
very cool. Very cool. So, and then you shared with me yesterday or a few days ago, you shared with me your chocolate chip banana bread. Which
Hmm.
did end up making it. It was very delicious, and I had to modify it though because, of course, doing it last minute, I didn't have everything on hand. I didn't have the whole wheat flour, which for people listening to this, I'll put the recipe down in the podcast note. Is really good. Is really good. So I didn't have the whole wheat flour, so I had to do 2 cups of white flour, and then I didn't have walnuts, but I had pecans, so I used pecans.
Mm.
And then my other problem, which actually ended up being really yummy, was I didn't have a full cup of chocolate chips. I only had a quarter cup, but I had butterscotch chips. So I did a
Ooh,
quarter of chocolate chips and a quarter of butterscotch chips, and it turned out really good.
that sounds delicious.
Yeah, my family loves it. I have 3 teenage boys, so it's not going to last real long. It's mostly
Yeah.
gone already, and I just made it. And the banana,
Yes.
and I happen to have bananas too. I'm like, hey, this is perfect. So it's really good. So how did you develop that recipe? Was it something that you saw and you modified, or was it something that you've been making for years?
Yeah, it was, well, actually, it's funny. Originally, it was a King Arthur flour recipe, but then I had
Mm,
adapted it to for when I was making it at my last job at Meta. We adapted it and kind of like changed it a little bit, and then so we could do it large scale.
mhm.
And then since then, I've also kind of tweaked a little bit more here and there. So it started out as one recipe, and now it's kind of become its own thing. But yeah, I always add extra spices and change up the flour ratio and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting how I do that a lot too, where I see a recipe and I'll modify it or I'll combine two recipes somehow. And it's really fun to do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But
Hmm.
for me, I have a certain, like, I like to do things a certain amount of times before I would publish it. Do you have a set
Hmm.
number of how many times you'd like to make it to have it turn out before you decide to share it?
No, not really a set number. I just as many times as it takes to make it how I like it, I guess. Typically, it's like only one or two times because I've made the recipe before somewhere along the way. But if it's something completely new that I'm trying out, probably two or three times before I perfect it and share it with the world.
Right, exactly. So, what has been your favorite Celofina spice to work with so far?
Oh, they're all so good, but I
They
love
are.
their vanilla beans because
Oh, nice.
I use vanilla in everything, and the vanilla beans are really good. And so I
Mhm.
love having the beans because then when I'm done with I use all the seeds up, then I take that leftover bean and I cut it up and I stick it in with my coffee, like my sugar for coffee. So I make vanilla sugar for my
Oh,
coffee every
nice.
morning. It's so good. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great tip. I never would have thought of doing that. That's great.
Yeah, it's so easy. And then it like you do a couple beans in there with like a cup of sugar and it's so fragrant. It's delicious.
Wow, that's nice. Now, I haven't really worked much with beans. Do you have to like, what do you have to do to them to make them usable?
You just have to nothing, you just like do a slice down the middle of it all the way down, and then you can
Okay.
kind of peel it open. And then I use the back of a knife, or you can use a spoon, and you just kind of scrape out the seeds, and you just add them to
Oh,
whatever it is. So if you're like replacing vanilla extract with vanilla bean in a recipe, you can
mhm.
use usually like half of a bean for
Mm.
the amount of extract that usually calls for.
Do you feel it gives a different flavor when you use that than when you use like the liquid vanilla?
I think so. If like not really in if you're gonna bake it, but if you're gonna put it in like a frosting or an ice cream or um, whipped cream, something like that, then the flavor
Mhm.
is much more pronounced with the vanilla bean, and it just tastes more natural. It's not made out of alcohol, and it's that just the bean itself, and it's super good. Yeah, vanilla beans are so good.
Oh, that's so interesting. I need to try that now because I'm like, I just have never tried that before. I've always just gone to the whole, the old liquid form, which, yeah,
Hmm.
you're right. It's just kind of, I don't know. I think it'd be more exciting to use a vanilla bean, even just more
Yeah.
fun, if not
Hmm.
even the flavor. It's just like more fun to use, I would imagine.
It is more fun, and it always feels like you're elevating your dessert, whatever you're making. Like, oh yes, I put a whole vanilla bean in it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just more natural and it's just, I think it's just better all around.
Yeah.
So, so when you're cooking, do you usually, I know it's hard with like a child around, but do you try to do it when she's busy or do you find yourself doing it when she's around? How does that work for you being a mom? It can be challenging.
Yeah, yeah, I can. Well, typically I do everything during nap time. So any of my recipes that I'm making or content that I'm making will be
Mhm.
during nap time. And I'd say half the time I get it all done in that time. And the other half she wakes up and then I'm battling her, trying like, no, don't eat that. No, don't touch this. Trying to pull the camera down. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of cameras, so you've ventured into photography now. Is that something
Mhm.
you added in after becoming a stay-at-home mom, or is it something you've always done?
Well, I actually did photography in high school a couple
Mm,
years, but that was a very long time ago now. And so I had to relearn, I had to like reteach myself
mhm.
after I quit my job. I was like, well, I really want to get back into photography and start doing food photography. So yeah, I just bought a camera and watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and
Yeah.
so far so good.
That's awesome. Absolutely. I kind of did similar thing too. In I did a little bit of video. I didn't get too much into video, but are you getting much into video like the creation? People have those videos where they're showing it being made. Have you done much of that yet?
Mhm. Yeah, on my Instagram, I pretty much only do videos. I don't really just do the pictures because, um, I think the videos are just really fun to make. But
Mm-hmm.
I will do some of them are the whole process of me whatever I'm making, and some of them are like, slicing into a cake or taking a bite of something, that sort of thing. But I do all my videos on my camera as well, and then I edit them on an app called InShot on my phone.
Very nice. Yeah, it's really fun. And I think people really just like videos. So they end up being more popular anyways. How
Mhm.
about Pinterest? Have you put stuff on Pinterest? Because that's a fabulous place for food.
Yes, I know. Actually, that's my plan is to go into Pinterest next. I years and years ago, I had a food blog called Baking with Brianna, and this was it was like
Ah,
my first time trying a food blog, and I was on Pinterest with that, but like I didn't continue doing that because at the time I was just focused on work and yeah, so I kind of stopped doing that. But yes, I will be going on to Pinterest. That's my next my next plan.
absolutely. It's great for food. And you can put videos on there too. And you can recycle, like take them from Instagram that use for Instagram and put them on Pinterest. Your
Mhm.
videos and you can do obviously still life pictures on Pinterest too, but videos they do have a limit for how long the videos can be on Pinterest, but you can put them
Mhm.
there. So, and even if you do a clip,
Yeah.
that's okay too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's what I should do. That's what I've been doing. I started like I was saying, I started doing YouTube shorts. And so I just post
Mm.
whatever I post on Instagram, then I just go over to YouTube and then I'll post the same thing and change like this music. Um, but the video is the same thing. And yeah.
I think that's the secret sauce too for people doing content creation is taking it and putting it in different ways and different platforms so that you can get more exposure.
Hmm.
It's a great way to use your content. And you want to use
Hmm.
the max out of your content as you can because
Yeah.
like as we said, sometimes it can be challenging to make that original content.
Hmm.
So you got to use it like crazy.
Yes. Yeah. It takes so long sometimes just to do one recipe that it's like, well, I gotta post this as much as I can everywhere.
I know, right? And then if you do a video, you can do like if you want to chop it up, you can do a piece here and then you can do the same recipe later with a piece there,
Mhm.
just keep reposting, which is just
Mhm.
it works out really well.
Yeah.
So, when you were making food when you were working, was there a certain focus or was it always just all kinds of different foods? Or did they, tend to serve more like cheesecakes and cakes or was it just kind of all just huge variety of things?
Well, okay, so at Meta, it kind of changed towards the end of when I was working there, but for a long time, we were doing a global menus. So every single day
Mm.
was a different menu, and it was a different theme based on different locations. And so sometimes we were doing very traditional Japanese desserts. Sometimes we were doing something
Mm.
that you would find in the Midwest. Sometimes we were doing a French dessert. So it was all over the place. It would just change every single day, which was really cool because then we got to try so many different recipes that I would never normally do, which was great. But yeah, it was kind of just everywhere, everything.
That's really great. And it's almost like training in and of itself because you're doing these different foods that you maybe wouldn't have otherwise tried. Or, and the nice thing about that too is I'm sure you probably got to taste it too, right? Because you're doing
Yes.
recipe development. But, it's like buying all those ingredients. Like, so you're learning to work with
Hmm.
them and learning to mix them together without having to actually pay for them. Like,
Yeah.
that's taking little classes here and there in different, desserts from different areas of
Mhm.
the world. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. One of the recipes we would make quite often was like a mochi cake. And
Mm,
that's with like mochiko flour, which I had never used before. And then I worked with it so much there that I got really familiar with it, which is really cool because I never otherwise would have. Everywhere else I'd worked beforehand was pretty traditional American type desserts or French inspired desserts.
Right. Like I've never even heard of that kind of flour. So,
Yeah, it's like a sticky rice flour. So it's like Japanese typically, but yeah.
oh, wow. So, what was your training that brought you to be able to do that kind of work?
I went to pastry school in 2010 and um, got my associate's degree with that, and then I got my bachelor's degree in hospitality afterwards. And so I spent the next decade or so working in just different bakeries and restaurants.
Very cool. Very cool.
Mhm.
Did you ever make donuts? I suppose you probably did, right?
Oh yes, yes.
I find making donuts at home kind of hard because you have to have so much oil, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of a hard. So I haven't really done much donuts, but I always think that would be kind of fun to make. Though my boys would probably love it, but
Yeah, donuts are fun. I for a while I because I really love donuts, but I always felt kind of guilty eating them because of all the oil. And so, but
uh-huh.
I love coconut oil. So I've started frying them in coconut oil at home,
Ah,
which is great. But coconut oil is kind of expensive. And so I can't do it very often because it uses so much.
right. So do you have to have it be really deep, or can you use just a little bit in a pan when you do that kind of thing with coconut oil?
It just needs to be deep enough to where you put the donut in that it doesn't touch the bottom of the pan. So you can
Okay.
if you just do one at a time and you do a small saucepan, you don't need a ton. But if you're trying to fry, 100 donuts or something crazy, you'd need a big pot and it'd be a lot.
Right, exactly. Yeah, oils have definitely become more expensive, especially if you want to use a different kind of oil, other than the vegetable and olive. At least olive is
Mhm.
more common, but some of the oils that are more rare, they're just, I mean, you're spending more money, like walnut oil, avocado oil,
Yeah.
those are just a lot more expensive, at least where I am in the Midwest. Probably is for you the same, I would imagine.
Yes. Everything is so expensive now. Just groceries in
Mhm.
general. Oh my gosh. Anytime I go buy ingredients, I'm like, what?
I know. It really has
Wild.
gone up since COVID, hasn't it? I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
that's what the instigator of this was because it
Mhm.
wasn't like that before, I didn't feel like.
I don't think so. I feel like ever since the last few years, my grocery bills have doubled easily, buying the
Mhm.
exact same things. It's crazy.
It really is. I know. It needs to stop
Yeah,
because
I
it's not
know.
good. It can't keep going up. That's what the scary part is. It's like, I feel like it's just out of control?
It really is. It really is. It's wild. I'm well, we're trying to like our plan right now is to move kind of out of Seattle and get some land. And
Mm.
I keep telling my husband, we're gonna have a hobby farm, we're gonna have chickens, and we're gonna have a greenhouse, we're gonna grow all our own food. So we'll see.
That would help though. I mean,
Yeah.
like I do a little garden, but it's not anywhere near enough to be any huge volume. You need a lot of space to
Yeah.
be able to do something like that. But to
Mhm.
even have your own chickens and stuff to get eggs, I mean, that would be
Yeah.
huge too. Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That would save a lot because I swear the eggs that I buy are like $8 a carton. It's
Yeah,
like crazy.
I know. That's kind of what it is for me too, depending on which brand I buy. It's like, yeah, $5 to $8 for
Yeah.
12. And, my boys eat a lot of eggs. So, like, when I make scrambled eggs for the five of us, I use like 20 eggs. I mean, that's crazy. I was telling somebody that recently and they were like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Because they're all
Oh my
teenagers and they eat
goodness.
a lot of eggs. 20 eggs. I make use 20 eggs, which is just blows up my brain when I think about it. Like, that's a lot of
That is
eggs.
a lot of eggs.
It's crazy. So do you like cooking
Mm.
other things too other than pastry, or are you just kinda more into the pastry stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy cooking. I cook, for all of our meals for my family, and I really like
Mhm.
it. Though I wouldn't say that I'm very amazing at cooking savory food. I'm pretty good, but I'm not a master chef or anything like that.
You're more skilled at the pastry stuff and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So what's your favorite thing to make at home? Like if you were to make whatever you wanted for your family to enjoy, that's a pastry food, what would you pick?
Probably croissants. I love to eat
Oh,
them. I love to make them. And there's just something so satisfying about having like a crunchy croissant with a cup of coffee in the morning.
I agree. That is delicious. Now, when you make croissants, I've never done that. How are they so flaky? Is it the dough that makes them flaky or the way you cook
Mhm.
them?
It's the dough. So it's a laminated dough. So what you do is you mix a dough, roll it out, and then you have this big slab of butter that you've
Mm,
beaten down into like a rectangle and you put it on top of the dough. And then you fold the dough over it, roll it out, and then you fold it again. And you keep doing that. You do that multiple times. So you get all these layers of dough, butter, dough, butter, dough, butter. And then by the time
mm.
you bake it, when you roll it up into the croissant shape too, then you're getting multiple layers on top of multiple layers. So that's where all the flake comes from, is all the butter layered in between the dough.
It sounds time consuming too. Does it take a fair amount of time?
Yeah, it does. If you have a sheeter, which most people wouldn't have one at their house, so they're big,
Mm,
these big, industrial equipment. But if you have a sheeter, if you're working in the industry, it can be a lot quicker because you can just run the dough through the sheeter. But when you're
mm.
rolling it out by hand, it can take a long time and it can, I mean, it's a little bit of a workout too. Not like
I
you got to put your
bet.
weight into it.
I think that that's true with dough, especially if you're having to knead it too, or anything with dough can be a little bit labor intensive and time intensive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have this recipe that my grandma made. She was from Finland. My dad was actually born in Finland. And so it was this braided bread and you have to like
Mm.
it's really like an old recipe, but it's a lot of work and you have to let it rise and you have to punch it down and then you have to let it rise again. Then you have to divide it all into these different strands and you braid it and you let it
Mhm.
rise again. So it's like a whole day process, you know.
Yeah.
But it's such a good recipe and it's an old recipe. But yeah, it's time intensive and labor intensive
Yes.
too. And it's hard to get the dough like evenly the strands even so that you want it to
Mhm.
cook evenly, right? Like I'm sure you can imagine what that means because you've done a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's a challenge, but I make it at Christmas every year. So it's the thing.
Yeah. I love those braided loaf breads. They're so good. I love all breads. They take a long time. I always would plan to make my own sourdough bread. And I
Mm,
do sometimes, but then I most of the time buy it because it's such a process to
it
to
really
make it.
is. I know. It really is a process. It's really good, but there's so many good bread makers out there too. It's just
Mhm.
amazing. I don't know if do you guys have Panera bread out there?
Mhm. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love their bread. That's really good. So do you get into like making your own frostings? And is there any
Mhm.
tips you have on making frostings?
Um, well, my favorite frosting recipe that I do like a faux Swiss meringue buttercream. So it has the texture of Swiss meringue buttercream, but instead of um, are you familiar with what Swiss meringue buttercream is? It's like
I am really not. No. Mm-mm.
so it's made with egg whites, and you kind of cook them over a double boiler just to like warm them up before you whip them and make a meringue out of them, and then you add in butter. But
Mm.
I like to instead use meringue powder and then mix that in with the powdered sugar, make a like a royal icing type of consistency, and then add in butter that way. And you get the same texture as like a Swiss meringue buttercream without having to go through the whole process of making it. And it's way
Ah,
easier. It's super quick and it's so silky smooth. I love it.
I don't know that I've ever seen the powder. I'll have to look for that. I'm sure it's in the cooking aisle.
Well, you can buy it at like a Michael's. They carry it,
Oh,
like in
sure.
their baking
Okay.
section. It comes in like a little tub, but I always just buy it on Amazon. And
Okay.
yeah, they have
Yeah.
so like Wilton makes one, but then I usually buy this smaller company. I'll have to look and see what it's that's like Julie something. It comes in a blue
Okay.
bag. I always use hers. Yeah.
Sure. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look for that because I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great little hack.
That's nice. Now, is that one that you have to keep refrigerated or can it sit out?
No, it can sit out. Yeah, it can sit out because you're using the meringue powder instead. So if you were doing like the regular kind, we use the egg whites, you'd have to refrigerate it. But with the
Right. That's
meringue
what I was thinking
powder, you don't
about.
have to. Yeah.
See, there's a couple of benefits to using that then.
Yeah.
Meringue is kind of, I don't know, I find it a bit of a challenge. I haven't done it very many times, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not doing it right. Do you just, I'm forgetting how you do it. Do you just whip the egg whites into the meringue, or how do I don't even remember how you do it.
Yeah, well, there's a couple different methods for meringues. There's like an American meringue, Swiss meringue, Italian meringue. A traditional American meringue, you just whip egg whites in your mixer with like some cream of tartar. Um,
That's it. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
yeah, and sugar. That's it. And you just whip those until you get the stiff peak. But you can do the Swiss, which is where you kind of warm up the eggs first. And then you can do the Italian where you whip the eggs till they're foamy. And then at the same time, you're cooking your sugar. So you're making a syrup out of your sugar instead of
Mm.
using just regular granulated sugar. And then you pour the hot sugar into the eggs while it's whipping. And then you get like a really glossy, delicious meringue out of that one. But it's a little bit harder.
Yeah, I bet. One thing I like to make, but I find it extraordinarily challenging, is pie crust to make that from scratch.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
often I'll just end up buying the pre-made because it's just so much easier. And so, what are your experience? What's your experience with making pie crust? And do you find it easier just to buy them as well? Because it's just hard. When I've done it, they're like crumbly. They're just not staying together good. What
Mm.
are your tricks or your ideas that help if you have any for pie crust?
I love pie crust. I love making pie. Um,
Mhm.
and I never ever buy the pre-made pie crust because I just I have a really good pie crust recipe that I always do. But
Nice.
I understand why people buy it. It's so much easier. But I think the way that I make it is there's a few different ways you can make pie crust. The way I always do is I throw all the dry ingredients into my mixer. And then I cut up my butter into little tiny cubes first, and I spread it out in a sheet pan and I freeze the butter into
Mm.
little cubes. So it's
Mhm.
completely frozen. And then I put it in and mix it in with the dry ingredients on low speed until you get like the size of a pea, little peas. And then you'll go through with your hands and kind of like flatten, like go like between your fingers, you kind of flatten the little pea-sized butter chunks.
Okay.
Um, and that gives you a really flaky dough, is when you go through and flatten it and get the really flaky dough from that. But the cold butter is like, it has to be as cold as possible. So that's why I freeze mine, because if it starts to warm up too much and then you go to make your pie dough, then it's going to mush into the dough too much and you're not going to get your flaky, delicious pie crust. You're going to get like a weird, crumbly, sugar kind of dough texture thing. And then it's
Uh-huh.
really hard to work with.
I think I know what you're talking about because I think that's what's happened to me before. It's like not sticking together. It's almost like in pieces and whatnot. Like you're just trying
Yeah.
to like smush it together. And
Yeah.
I recently found a recipe too that talked about, I think it was some sort of biscuits. And they also talked about you have to freeze the butter. And I'm like, I had never heard of such a thing before. And they said the same thing. It's like it has to be frozen. Otherwise, it's not going to do what you want it to do. And it's such an
Yeah.
interesting tip because I don't think many people are going to think about doing that unless they're told that. That's not a
Yes.
thing anybody's going to think of.
Hmm. Yeah. A lot of recipes will just say cold butter. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm someone who's never made this before, I'm gonna think, okay, I'll pull a piece of butter out of my fridge and I'll cut it up and let it sit here on the counter while I'm doing this other stuff, and then I'll put it in. But then by that point, it's not really that cold, and it gets too soft, and yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, because people don't realize that that is a thing. Because unless you're told, you're not going to think of that. So yeah,
yeah.
that's a huge thing. So what does your daughter like to eat? Does she have a favorite thing that you make? Just
Oh, I'm trying to get her to eat more food.
oh
she
yeah.
she's yeah, she doesn't, I don't know, she doesn't like to eat that much. She likes cheese.
Mm.
Yeah, she eats a lot of cheese, and well, this is terrible. She loves ice cream. She's only 18 months old, so I don't really give her any, but every once in a while if we get some, um she'll see it because she knows what it is because of her book. Some of her books have ice, there'll be like an ice cream cone there or something. So she knows what ice cream is. So she'll
Yeah.
point to it and ask for some, and I'll give her like a little tiny taste. And then, but then once she gets any, then she's like, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream for like the rest of the night. So
I totally know. Yes, they definitely like ice cream. It's good though. I don't blame them. I like ice cream too.
I I do too. It's delicious.
It really is. Have you ever made ice cream, homemade ice cream?
Yes, I have. At home, I just do like a no churn because I don't have an ice cream maker.
Yeah.
I've in places I've worked, I've made. I used to actually be an ice cream maker at one point for this local ice
Oh.
cream shop here in
Oh
Seattle,
wow.
which was really fun. So I made tons and tons of ice cream there. But yeah, at home, I'll just do the no churn one, which is like whipped cream and sweetened condensed milk, and you just mix it together and put in your flavors and like freeze it for 6 hours, and then you got ice cream.
Perfect. That's a good thing to try too.
Yeah.
Do you have any cookbooks that you love to use or that you recommend?
um, I have a whole countertop of these really nicely curated looking cookbooks, and I never ever open them.
I understand.
I wish I had a good one, but I don't.
I can understand. I mean, I sometimes use them, or, sometimes I use them even for inspiration to make something a little bit different, to alter it a little bit. When I'm wanting some sort of inspiration, sometimes I will go to that. But yeah, recipes are everywhere. They're online, like we were saying earlier. Online, they're
Mhm.
on all the social media platforms.
Yeah,
They're everywhere. But
yeah,
that's not a bad thing either, because
yeah. So many
we all get
options.
right. We all get to try different things. So on your Instagram, do you actually have the recipe in your post so people can see how to
Mhm.
make it? Hmm.
Yeah, I do all yeah, I put every anytime I post a recipe, the whole full recipe will be in the post itself. Eventually I'll like I was saying, I'll get a website and have it on there, but yeah, they're just all in the post. I personally, if I'm looking for a recipe on Instagram or something, and I much prefer to just be able to like scroll down and look at in the post itself and then like take a screenshot of the recipe and then have it versus having to go click here and go find it and go down, sift down through the ads and then get to the post and it's a whole thing.
I totally agree. And, I think it's a thing too where you could, if you did have a website, you could do both, because then if people want to print it too, then you can print from the
Mhm.
website, whereas you can't really print from Instagram. But yeah, you can do a
Yeah.
screenshot. But yeah, so that'd be a good way to have it in two different places. But it does take a while. I so wish Instagram would be usable on a laptop for typing, because typing on your phone that much content gets to be really old, as you know, and very
Yes.
time consuming and annoying,
Hmm.
because you get all these typos when you're trying to type.
Yeah, I a lot of time I will go and type something up on a note on my computer and then it'll be
Sure.
synced to my phone and then off my phone I'll copy it and fix it that way.
There you go. That's a great way to do it, because it gets so annoying, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
it just
I
is.
know. Yeah, and then I feel like I'll try to type out on with my thumbs like one word and it keeps changing it to something else because I don't know, I'm like
Yes.
misspelling it. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I've tried to type this one word 4 times. Crazy.
I know the autocorrect is not as much as it's worth. I mean, sometimes it saves me, but most of the time yeah, it's a total pain. Like, no, I'm really trying to say that word. It's really the word I'm trying to use. It just
Yeah.
So do you like to make cheesecakes?
I do like to make cheeses. I recently posted one actually, it was last week or the week before, and I mentioned in that post that I like never think about making cheesecake, and then every once in a while, I'll be like, oh, I should do that, and I'll make a cheesecake, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so good. Why don't I make these all the time? And then another year
Mhm.
or two will go by.
Yes, I know. I love cheesecakes too. And the graham cracker crust, it's pretty easy to make, I think,
Mhm.
as far as it's a lot easier than making a flaky pie crust, as we were just talking about earlier. It's
Mhm.
much easier.
Yeah, and the nice thing too is you can use like any kind of cookie you want. So if you want an
Mhm.
Oreo cheesecake, you can use Oreos, or you can use graham crackers, or you can use like cinnamon flavored Teddy Grahams or something. You can use all
Oh,
these
yeah.
different kinds of cookies and get different flavors, which is nice.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I had never thought of using the Teddy Graham flavored ones. That's a great idea.
Mhm.
Oreos, I've seen those done a lot, and they even sell that pre-made in the store. But so when you're doing it, how do you usually mash yours up?
I usually use a food processor.
Okay.
So yeah, I just throw everything in a food processor. Sometimes if I don't have one around me from somewhere else, I'll just throw everything in a Ziploc bag and I'll take
Mhm.
a rolling pin and just smack it.
Yeah, that's generally how I do it because I still don't have a large food processor. I have a little one. So it's like, I don't want to keep doing these rounds over and over again. It's like
Yeah.
just put it in a bag and eat the heck out of it.
Yeah. It's
I have
kind
some
of
of those
like
mallets too.
therapeutic. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly. Exactly. I know that makes me think of that bread I was talking about earlier. One of the things you have to do, I don't know if I mentioned that, is you have to punch it down once it rises and you have to punch it down. And my son, this last Christmas was so funny because my youngest is 13 and he wanted to he saw me do it and he's like, "Oh, can I do that?" And I'm like, "Yes." So he came over and he was punching the dough down. It was the funniest thing. He thought it was the best thing ever. Like, I get to punch this dough flat. Like it was pretty funny. It's fun
That's
when
so cute.
when they want to cook with you. Like maybe when your daughter gets older, it's something really fun to do. Like, I mean, my boys have done it a little bit and they have really short attention spans, but they will cook a little bit. So it's fun when you're cooking with them and you can teach them things and you're having fun at the same time. So I think it's
Yeah.
a great thing to do.
Yeah, that sounds so fun. I'm really looking forward to the day when she wants to help me cook a little bit. It'll be so cute.
Oh, absolutely. I'm trying to remember. I recently had, when I did the Salafina, I had some sort of flour. What was that flour that I had? And I was trying to think of ways to use it. I ended up using it in with different things to make like a tea. Have you used any of their
Oh,
flours?
is
Why am
it
I drawing a blank
the
on the name of it?
butterfly pea, the blue one, or was it
No, it
hibiscus?
was hibiscus. It was
Yes.
hibiscus. Yeah, yeah. Have you used that in any other ways? I mean, I couldn't really think of another way to use it other than with flavoring teas. Like, I don't really know how to use that.
Yeah, I haven't used theirs yet, but in the past I've made cookies and then I'll like mix the hibiscus powder into the glaze and then you can do a
Mm,
drizzle glaze and then it gets like a
okay.
really vibrant pink color.
Oh, I bet. That's really cool. That's fun. Yeah, I was just struggling with ways to use it because I'm like, I really wanted to try using it. And I'm like, but how do I use it? Like, I didn't have great ideas of how I wanted to use it. So
Mhm.
I also tried their smoked paprika, which was
Oh.
fun. And I ended up using it on, made it into like a powder, like breaded chicken. So I added it with a bunch of different herbs with breadcrumbs. And then so my family really liked that flavor of the smoked paprika.
Mm.
And when I looked online, it said it was really good for things like meats and stuff. So that's kind of where I used it. I don't know. I guess it's more of a savory flavor. So you wouldn't be using that in
Mhm.
any kind of pastry cooking.
Yeah, yeah, I would not. However, I do use it a lot when I make chicken at home. Like I'll
Mm,
do
mm-hmm,
like I usually use the air fryer and I'll do chicken
mm,
legs and I'll like marinate them and then do like a chicken rub and I do a lot of smoked paprika with that.
mm.
So
That's
good.
a
And
good
brown
idea.
sugar, of course.
Yes. Yeah, I noticed in your recipe you used brown sugar instead of any white sugar. Do you think that brings about a different flavor? I mean, I thought it was really good in the bread, that chocolate chip banana bread recipe. Is there a reason why you use brown sugar fully and no white sugar in that recipe?
I prefer the brown sugar because it does alter the flavor a little bit, but it makes it more moist with the brown sugar because brown
Oh.
sugar has more of like a water content to it from the molasses in it, and so
Mm.
it does help like cakes and breads be more moist than white sugar.
Do you always pack your brown sugar or do you sometimes leave it loose?
Well, I typically weigh my ingredients, so I mostly just weigh everything on my
Mm.
kitchen scale. But if I am using cups, I will pack it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I generally tend to pack it too. And I don't know if it's something recipes when I was young and my mom always saying pack it. So I just always pack it. I never leave it loose. So I didn't really have a reason or know why, but
Yeah.
it's just something that I always did, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you ever use white sugar? You probably do, right? In
Mhm.
some of the recipes you have
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I do. I use white sugar a lot. But if I can use brown sugar, I do prefer it depending on what I'm making. Yeah.
Do you ever dabble in using like an artificial sweetener like Splenda?
No, I don't. I have used different types of sugars though, like coconut sugar or maple
Mm, mhm.
sugar
Yeah.
for different things. And I like to do that as well. But I don't like the alternative sugars.
I know. I don't really either, but my oldest son is really into weightlifting. And so like right now he's cutting calories. So he doesn't want as many calories. So a couple of
Mm,
times I've made banana bread with Splenda just for him to have it with fewer calories. And it actually turns out pretty good. But yeah, I know what you mean. I prefer the natural, but him doing that has
yeah.
gotten me into doing it a little bit with the Splenda.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. I there was like sometimes I've in my past I've gone on little kicks where I'll try not to eat very much sugar at all. So then
Mm.
instead, which is still sugar, I'll just like switch it out for honey.
Oh yeah.
It's like
Honey's
just
a
as
good
bad.
ingredient. I know, right? One other thing I like to use, which one of the chef I had on a few weeks ago, she has a lot of recipes where she uses maple syrup. And I'm like, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like I hadn't thought of using it. She uses it in recipes that you wouldn't ever expect having maple syrup in. So it's kind of a fun
Mm.
ingredient I hadn't thought of using in different ways. Do you use it much?
Yeah, I do use maple syrup. I love flavored maple syrup. Um,
Mm.
in the past, I've used it to make like a pecan pie around the holidays instead of corn syrup, and that's
Oh
really
yeah.
good.
Mhm.
And yeah, sometimes I'll just like throw it in little things. Like if I'm making pancakes all the time, instead of adding a little bit of sugar to the pancakes, I'll just do maple syrup. I'm gonna put maple
Sure.
syrup on it anyways afterwards.
Exactly. Different way to make it, maybe make it taste a little bit different, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anything we haven't talked about that you had wanted to mention or discuss or point out, or anything you want to say about your Instagram account that or mention any recipes you've made recently?
Let's see. I don't know. I well, right before we started this, I was taking some photos of these little cakes that I made, these little chocolate cakes, and because
Mm,
I had some like leftover cake batter from an order that I did, and so I
okay.
just baked some little tiny 4-inch cakes, and then I put some whipped cream on top and some fresh berries, and of course, I had to eat one, which is delicious. But that'll be on my page this week, maybe
Mm,
tomorrow or Friday. Um,
nice.
yeah, so that I'm excited for that one. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to grow. So follow me. And yeah.
What's your name on YouTube? What do you go by on there?
YouTube is also Garden Box Baking. So YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram are all Garden Box Baking.
Okay. And how did you come
Yeah.
up with that name?
I have these two large garden beds in front of my house, and I was like kind of pondering what to call my Instagram. And I knew that I wanted it to be something that was kind of like floral or gardeny kind of a kind of a thing, you
Hmm.
know. And
Sure.
I was just like kind of looking at those garden beds out front, and I thought, well, let me see if this one's if like garden box is taken. Um, and it wasn't, so I went with that. I try to like grow some. I'd like to grow a lot of stuff and use whatever I can in my baking, depending on what
Sure.
I've grown for the season. So that's kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah, that brings me up to a question. What kind of herbs would you use with baking? Like, I don't feel like I use many herbs with baking. I do with, regular cooking, but not necessarily with any kind of desserts.
Mhm. I love to do rosemary in baking.
Okay.
Yeah, rosemary's really good. You can do like mint a lot. Mint is really good in baking. Um, Fresh thyme, depending on the recipe, like thyme, and then if you like maybe do some lemon, thyme and lemon together, really good for baking.
Mm,
Sage is like if you do brown butter and sage together, so
okay.
good. Yeah. I love doing herbs if I can in baking. But like and so some of the recipes I'll use those in would be like scones or maybe some like shortbread cookies, like some crunchy shortbread cookies.
Mm.
Or like if I'll do like a quick bread and then on the glaze, I can put on some fresh herbs into the glaze, that kind of thing.
Very cool. I really haven't thought much about doing that. So that's really fun. I need to get into that. And my garden, my sister gave me some mint and it is like a weed. Like it took
Yeah.
over I have these boxes, these garden boxes in my garden, and it like took over the entire box like a weed. I had like all this mint. And I'm like, what am I gonna do with this? Like it's so much mint, like extreme amount
Yeah.
of mint. And we have guinea pigs too, and they actually love to eat the mint, but they can only eat so much mint. So
Yeah.
I had so much mint, and I'm like, can you do you ever use dried mint or is it mostly fresh?
No, I just use fresh. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't know if a dried if it would be any good. I guess I don't really know.
Yeah, I've never tried it. I don't know. I feel like it'd get like well, I don't know. I just imagine it in my head what it would look like, and I feel like it'd just be this like little sad brown shriveled leaf.
Right. And nobody sells dried mint. I mean, they sell dried other herbs, but I've never
Yeah.
seen dried mint. So I'm like, well, maybe
Yeah.
it's just not a thing. Well, ice cream, I guess you could somehow put them in. I don't know though, because you don't really want flakes in ice cream, right? Like,
Yeah, no, if you're gonna do like a mint chocolate chip ice cream, when you make your ice cream base, you kind of heat the milk up and you steep the mint in and
oh,
then strain it out and then make it that way.
gotcha. Yeah, I recently saw something that was similar to that. It was something else, but yeah, maybe it was steeping rosemary. Is that a thing? I don't remember what it was, but yeah, it was to transfer the flavor. And I'm like, this is weird. But then when the recipe later, it said, yeah, remove all of that.
Yeah, yeah. Gotta strain it out. And then if you leave it in too long, it can get pretty bitter. So you gotta time
Oh,
it. Yeah.
gotcha. Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for doing
Yeah.
this. It was really fun to talk with you and learn more about pastry cooking and find out some secrets from you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was so fun.
It was fun. You have a good day.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.